Hey guys, welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be focusing on getting my transfer case swapped from the 231 that came in my sport model to a 241 that came out of a Rubicon. The big difference will be the gear ratio. The stock one has a 3-to-1 gear ratio and the Rubicon one has a 4-to-1 gear ratio, which will really make my life rock crawling in a manual a lot easier. It should, with the new transfer case, pretty much just want to walk up things at idle without me having to worry about stalling out, going over rocks or bumping things. So I'm pretty excited about that. That's going to be a big improvement. And while I'm down there, I'm also upgrading my transfer case skid plate. It should give me a little bit more clearance, but mostly it's a thicker, stronger skid plate. So let's go ahead and get to it. So I had an aftermarket skid plate that was protecting my oil pan and transmission. I went ahead and removed that because it was going to be in the way. I also went ahead and took a torch to all my skid plate bolts, heated them up real good, and then broke them loose with an impact. And then I also went ahead and removed these 4 nuts for the transmission mount. The transmission mounts to the skid plate, so you got to remove that to take off the skid plate. Okay guys, I'm gonna go ahead and get the plug out of the way a little early on this one. If you watch the video, you enjoy it, you find it helpful, or think you want to see more content like it, please think about subscribing to the channel. Drop me a like, give me some comments, tell me what you liked about it, what you didn't like. Just let me know. All that stuff helps. It helps me. It helps get the videos promoted more so they're seen. I do put a decent amount of work into these videos. It's not the easiest thing to stop while I'm in the middle of a job and film it, but I do it because hopefully it'll help someone else out. So yeah, let's get back to work. So I do have a buddy who offered to come help me do this tomorrow, and I really appreciate that. So shout out to Mike if you're watching the video, thanks. But however, I still find it really awkward to try and film videos around people. I'm just not used to it yet. So I'm gonna try and get as much of this done today as possible, and I'll probably just have him help me reinstall the new one tomorrow because that's gonna be really hard to lift up and line up by myself. So yeah, I guess I'm just a little bashful. Okay, just so everyone's aware here, this transfer case skid plate is what bolts to the frame, and it's what holds up the transfer case and the transmission. So before you take this skid plate off, you need to support the transmission. You do not want that to fall down on you. You don't want it to tear anything up because it's unsupported. So I'm gonna figure out how I'm gonna support everything, maybe get a little crazy with ratchet straps too, before I drop this skid plate. So this is what I've ended up with. I ran a ratchet strap across there, underneath, kind of lifting up. And you know, I obviously don't trust my life to a ratchet strap. So I have the jack there also supporting it. I used a block of wood just so it didn't push hard on anything it shouldn't. Then on the back side here, I hooked in to the frame again and went under the transfer case, and am supporting the transfer case because it's also attached to the transmission, so it's all one big piece. So that'll keep all the leverage from being all the way in the rear. And then I took a baby jack and stuck a block of wood on there so it could reach, and I'm holding up the skid plate. So now with that supported, I'm gonna go ahead and remove these bolts on the other side, and then I'll come back over here and remove them on this side and let you guys watch. Okay, so the other side's undone, so it's just these 3 currently holding it up. Okay, so I'm gonna go to the other side and lower the jack, and that skid plate should come down, and hopefully nothing else comes down with it. All right, here's the stock skid in all its glory. It's actually heavier than I expected it to be. In case you didn't know, when metal's thin, when they stamp these shapes into them like that, it adds rigidity and makes it a lot stronger. So that's why it's got all this shape in it, but that's what helps catch on rocks and dirt a lot and hold you up. So when you have a thicker, strong metal, it can be totally flat and smooth like this. So this is where I'm going to gain a little bit of clearance, and it's I don't know the thickness of it, but it's a lot stronger, it's a lot thicker, so it's nice and smooth, so it'll help just kind of glide over things and slide instead of catching and grabbing so much. Here's a quick look down here without the skid plate. Looking a little gross right here. Gonna have to probably clean that up. Doesn't look great. But here is your transfer case, transmission. This is your transmission mount. You could replace that now. Probably would have been a good thing, but I didn't buy one because I didn't think about it. So now we'll move on to disconnecting the wires and starting to undo the bolts for the transfer case. Just to show you what I'm working with here on this Jeep and how bad it really is, I was tapping this with a hammer and chisel, knocking off chunks. The frame used to be pretty flush with these. Now there's a good space. You can come down here. Here's a little bit I haven't knocked off yet. It's pretty thick. Here's some examples of the rust that was right here. And if you look right about here, I tapped that with a hammer and it's soft enough to put a dent through, which means it's probably, yeah, I think I got a hole there now. Yeah. So, kind of makes me sad I have so much money into this, but yeah, I think it's pretty obvious I will be forced to do frame repair and or frame swap at some point. I don't know, I'll probably get a couple years out of it and maybe do some repairs or just look for a real clean frame somewhere and do a frame swap. But yeah, it's rough, pretty disheartening. I went ahead and cleaned up that section of the frame on both sides. I got all the big flaking parts off. I didn't bother hitting it with a wire wheel because if there's already rust holes starting, it's rusting from both sides. And I mean, there's no point in going the extra mile to try and save something that's rotted through. So it would have just been a waste of time. But I slapped a few coats of rust converting primer on both sides and then put a thick coat of steel lid over it. Now I'm going to move on to actually doing what I came here to do. So to start dismantling this, we're going to have to disconnect. You'll probably have a linkage unless you've upgraded to a Savvy shifter cable like this. So I'm going to disconnect my cable. I'm going to disconnect this vent hose, disconnect this wire connector, and then if you come around the side, you've got another wire connector here for your speedometer gear. This wire for this connector is also attached right here, so you're going to have to pull it off of that mount. And I think that's all that's attached to it. I'll let you know if I find anything else. Once that's all off, there are a bunch of little nuts that go all around that attach it to the transmission, so we'll have to undo those. But I'm going to start by disconnecting everything. So this transmission mount has a bracket that kind of wraps around and up the other side, and it kind of blocks these bolts on that side. So I think I'm going to just take it off. It's just these 4 bolts right here, and then I can take that whole thing down and reach the bolts on the other side a lot better. I'm going to hit it with the impact for speed and ease, but I'm going to also not go too crazy and make sure I don't break anything because that goes right into the transmission, and I don't want to have to deal with that. So that mount on the other side actually has a spot for the exhaust hanger to go through, so I just have to go over there and pull it off of that. Those bolts are 9/16, so I'm going to start taking them off. I think there's about 6 of them. Twist it. How in the hell? So this topmost bolt right up here was a pain to get off. I ended up lowering the jack very slowly and gently. I probably lowered it an inch or two just so I could get enough room up here to get like a tiny motion with the wrench. It was too close to the floorboard up there to get actually anything on it. The exhaust was on the way to get anything from this direction. You could get kind of on it from here, but you couldn't move it because everything was touching. So I lowered it a little bit and it gave me just enough space that I could actually get that nut off. Plus, I like the idea of putting you on camera.
Oh my God.
I'm sure this isn't the first time a man's asked you to do something on camera.
We're getting close here.
Yeah, are you just ready to just kind of controlled drop is what I'm going for. You don't have to put your hand on it.
You don't want to try it?
I mean, we can try. I just don't have a lot to hold on to. Once part of the spins, right? There you go. See, this one's way lighter than the other one. I like to use my legs for things.
Nothing but time.
I do.
You got that kind of money.
That was to run it into the old skid plate. I think I have started holes. Yep. I lived my whole life like this and I got started. Okay guys, so Mike just left. We got the transfer case on there. I didn't film a whole lot because I didn't want to waste a bunch of his time while he was helping me out to go into detail on this and film it all, but yeah. Also, look at that sky. Looks like cotton candy. So let me show you real quick a few things we did that I didn't really have time to film, and then I can move on to getting, I guess, the skid plate on. So one thing I didn't really show was how long it took us to get my previous transfer case off of there. This particular bolt, but on the old transfer case, was basically fused on there. It was just all corroded and rusted inside the casing here, and it would not let go of this transfer case. We beat on it with hammers, we jacked it up, we tried to pull it off with a ratchet strap, we sprayed PB Blaster all over it, and I mean, we had a jack stand and a board and we were wobbling it up and down to get it to flex. We did that for an hour or two at least, I think, and I was working on it for a while before he got here and I was having no luck. So after, I mean, it was probably a combination of all these things, but we had torched that particular area for a long time. We did it a few different times, and then finally at the end I literally just torched the hell out of it, and he was wobbling it with the board. We had a jack stand right here, and the board was on top of it, and the board was nice and long, so it was real easy to wobble it from out here, because when we started we were kind of laying under it and trying to lift up and down on it, and that was exhausting. But with the board and the lever action, it was a piece of cake. You could do it with one finger. So that was a nightmare. Hopefully you guys don't have to do that, because it should have just slid right off, but it was god awful. Another thing is a couple of the studs had come out when taking them off. So what I did was put some Loctite on there and cranked the studs back in I used the red Loctite. I should never have to take them out. I don't ever plan on taking this off again. If I do, you can just torch it and kind of melt the Loctite to get them back out. Another thing you can see here is this gasket maker. We spread some gasket maker along there and squished it on, so it should have a good seal there. This 241 transfer case looked like it had a gasket on it, so we kind of scraped off what was left of that one. My particular transfer case did not have a gasket on it. I don't know if it just evaporated, if I ever had one, or if because his was a 241 on an automatic transmission and mine was a 231 on my manual transmission, if maybe mine just didn't need one or didn't have one, I don't know. No transmission fluid or anything poured out when I took mine off. Mine had a nice seal in there. Other videos I saw people removing these, when they did it, a bunch of fluid poured out. So yeah, I don't know. Mine was nice and dry. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. So right here is an example on my old transfer case. Right around this ring, all the way around, is where we put the gasket maker. Also, if anyone wants to buy a 231 transfer case, I've got a spare. And I also have a Savvy shifter cable to go with it. And then finally, when we put it back up there, I put a bunch of anti-seize on the threads here, so the nuts will be easier to get off if I ever do have to take it off again. It's kind of late now, and I think I have to run into work to help. They're having an issue, but tomorrow I'll come back and I'll probably put on my Savvy shifter cable for this transfer case because it's different for the 241 and the 231, so I had to buy a new one again. And I'll put that on probably before I put the skid plate on because it'll be much easier to access everything in here. So I'm about to start this Savvy shifter cable, and my fender flares came. I got another one of these boxes on the other side of the Jeep, right over there. So that's my front and rear fender flares, but I can't do the rear yet because I'm still waiting for the wraparound armor that the flares will attach to. Sorry for the wind noise, guys. I got a fan going. It is hot and I can't live without it, so here we are. I'm gonna go ahead and reconnect my hose on here. I don't want to forget to do that. I'll grab a pair of pliers in a second and move the clamp down to hold it. And then this is the connector for, if I remember correctly, to indicate when you shift into four-wheel drive. So this is what tells the dash light to come on that says that you're in four-wheel drive. It is different from the 231 to the 241 transfer case. So you could find a connector that fits in there and splice something up to work. Or if you don't care, kind of like I think I don't care, you don't have to plug it in and you just won't have the indicator come on your dash to say that you're in four-wheel drive, but you'll still have the lever sticking up to say that you're in four-wheel drive. So you just won't have the dummy light. Next, I stuck my wire back on here just to kind of hold it in place. And then I'm just going to reconnect this cable. There we go. Just had to fight it a little bit. This transfer case was drained when it was taken out, so I need to put new fluid in it. This is your fill, this is your drain. Obviously I don't need to mess with the drain because it's empty. If you're putting in one, I would recommend just changing the fluid. Just make sure you got new clean fluid in there. And then I'm going to take the drain plug out, and I got ATF +4 fluid to put in there. That's what I saw recommended on the TJ forums. So this is a 10mm Allen head. This is not going to work out well. Whoop. Oh, I did it. So I think this is supposed to hold like 2.1 quarts. I haven't even done 2 yet, and it's kind of spilling out, and it's because my transfer case is angled down like this. So what I think I'm going to try and do real quick is jack it up a little more level so I can actually get it filled correctly. Oh, I have a fan base I have to please. There are dozens of people who look forward to my videos.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Alright, so there is no science to filling these up. You just fill it up until it starts to spill out of the fill. And then you know, she's full. So now I'm going to put the cap back in there. Alright, so now she's all filled up, plugged. Everything looks good, spinning freely. Time to move on. I'm not going to go into too much detail on how to install the cable because my linkage, the old linkage, is already removed, so it would only be half of the process. But in general, if you need to remove the mount here, it's these 4 bolts. If you have carpet, it would be under the carpet, and you have to kind of take out the middle console to be able to pull the carpet out of the way. So when I installed the 231 Savvy shifter cable, I did leave the skid plate on, and it was kind of a pain to reach up and around to get to everything, but it is possible. But now I've got the skid plate off, so I have tons of room to get up into here. Right here is where your linkage would have attached to the 4-wheel drive shifter, and you have to remove that, remove a rubber grommet, and then insert this little guy in there. And I'll kind of show you when I'm installing the new one because I have to swap this out because it's a different size. And then you would mount that big flat bracket right here with those 4 bolts I just showed you. And then the other bracket attaches to, I think it's this one and this one. So it attaches to the transmission, and then it attaches right here to your actual shifter on the transfer case. And I'll have to put another one of these balls down here now. So this is how you'll put it on there. You'll have the nut, a washer, and then this goes in with kind of this little aluminum bushing, and it'll go in like that. On the shifter bracket will be in the middle. You stick that on and then bolt it on. And once you get that all tightened down, you then have this end that is compressible, and it opens it up so you can slide it over that little ball. So I'm going to go ahead and get these tightened on to both ends, and then I'll get under there and I'll start to mount this and show you the orientation everything goes in. So here's a quick look how those go in. This one points outside away from the transmission. That's for the actual shifter bracket. Down here on the transfer case, this one points inside towards the transmission. So up here, it's got that little aluminum bushing that goes in, and this goes through it, and then it's a washer and nut on this side. Down here, it's the nut and then that aluminum bushing, and on this side, I've got the washer and this little ball. So it's kind of a little backwards. I think that's the correct way to do it. I think I saw some people kind of sticking the aluminum bushing through on this side instead of the washer. I don't really know what's the right way. It's very tight, it's very snug. It just makes sense because there's kind of a recessed area to get that aluminum bushing to kind of fit in there. So I put it on this side. I think it'll hold no matter what. Shouldn't be too bad. But yeah, just so you got the orientation. This one points in, this one points out. So this bracket mounts on the bolts that connect the transfer case and the transmission. If you start at the bottom here of the transmission and count up, it's the second and third bolts, and you can pretty much tell because it lines everything up. So then you can go ahead and connect this kind of quick connect here if you want. And then the next part is going to be connecting this bracket here to these 4 bolts that go to the inside of the Jeep. Now this part's kind of a 2-person job because you just need someone to hold the bolts on the inside while you tighten them. But yeah, and you've got some play if you're having trouble getting this connected. You can push back and forth on this rod to get it kind of lined up so you can get it connected. Here's a quick look at how I routed it. I took it up and looped it through here and back around and mounted it. It seems to work that way, keeps everything out of the way. This hose kind of wiggles here, got plenty of room. So one quick note, before you connect both ends of this, if you know where your transfer case is in, I believe mine's in too high, then you want to make sure this isn't too high before you connect them together. Or if you've got this in 4 low, make sure that one's in 4 low before you put them together. That way they're shifting in the correct orientation. It's not the right way to say it, but you know what I mean. So once those are connected, these are your big adjustments to put tension on everything or loosen it if you need to. And then you've got some fine adjustment here by spinning these and then locking these nuts in place to hold it where it needs to go. I'm not really gonna try and explain how to do that. Just adjust it, get everything where you think it needs to be. Make sure you shift smoothly through everything between 2 high, neutral, 4 high, and 4 low. Make sure everything feels right, and that's when you know you got it in adjustment. Come back down here and make sure you tighten everything up real good. So I've got everything pretty much done now. I'm just waiting for my fiance to get off work so I can tighten these down, and once those are tight, I'll check it through 2 high, 4 high, neutral, and 4 low. Make sure it shifts good and everything feels tight and nothing's sloppy. I backed this one off quite a bit, and I backed that one off most of the way to get everything to line up. I think that'll be good. If not, I'll just adjust it. I like to do most of the adjustment down here because I had to take this back off to be able to get to this one because there's no room to get a wrench on it up there. So while I'm waiting, I'm going to go ahead and I think put the transmission mount back on. And once the transmission mount is on, I can jack it back up and put the skid on. So if you guys remember correctly, the transmission mount goes over this exhaust hanger bracket here. So we're gonna slide it over that first and then line up the bolt holes. All right, and these are 5/8, so I'm just gonna go ahead and tighten them down. And the transmission mount is back on. I'm gonna go ahead and check, make sure all of my bolts mounting the transfer case to the transmission are nice and tight. I know these 3 are because I just checked them. I'll check the other side. And after that, I think we're ready to put the skid plate back on, which will be nice. So I've got everything, I think, adjusted pretty well down there. Granted, I'll check it again once I actually have the Jeep put back together and can drive it. But this is kind of what you want, a nice, good snap into position. That's 4 high, neutral, and then 4 low. And it holds, not a whole lot of wiggle. When I take it back down to 2 high, there's a little bit of compression, like the cable's a little tight, so it's not just sitting like totally at the bottom, but you're not talking much. And before I adjusted it this time, it didn't really kind of snap into 4 high. Instead of doing that, I could kind of pull it up and there was a little bit of wiggle, so that was kind of telling me it wasn't tight enough. But I like this. That's a good snap, and it's real easy to do. If you guys have the linkage still and you've ever put a lift on it, I'm sure it's kind of a monster. Mine was real hard to shift. It wasn't horrible, but it was not good. And I heard they slip and can kind of come out of adjustment. It's just that one little nut on there that kind of holds everything in an adjustment. And it's just not a great setup. The cable, in my opinion, is a very worthwhile thing if you're going to off-road or do a lift, because it's buttery smooth. So yeah, look into that if you're thinking about lifting your Jeep or just want to improve your shifting into 4-wheel drive. While we're talking about putting that skid plate back on, this was my transmission and oil pan skid plate. This is from, what is it, Moore Off-Road? I forget what it stands for, Mountain Off-Road something. But it mounted to the old transfer case using the 2 threaded holes that were already there. I'm not sure what those are for on a stock skid plate, but they did exist, and that just threaded right in. So I measured and checked it, and it does match up with that hole and that hole, but those just aren't threaded. So I'll just have to use nut and bolt, not a big deal. But yeah, so if you're curious if that'll work for you, it will. And that's a Barnes 4-wheel drive transfer case skid. I got this from the same guy I got the axles and transfer case from. I basically pillaged his Rubicon and made mine a Rubicon. plate is on. It looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. I don't know if you saw how I did it, but I pretty much did it by myself. I put up 2 jack stands on the other side on their lowest setting, and then I only had 1 more small jack stand, so I used that plus this jack. And I had my fiance help me just kind of set it up there, and then I just went back and forth, raised it up, and ratcheted up the jack stand, and back and forth until I got it as close as possible. Then I just lifted it up and got 1 bolt threaded, and I went back and forth and did that until I had it all set up there. And yeah, it worked out pretty good. Finally almost died once. And if you're curious, I did go ahead and use new bolts, but I don't think I needed to. My old ones were actually in pretty good shape. But if you want to get new hardware, I had already ordered it even before I took them out. So this is the size you need, and I think it'll work great. They threaded it in fine. I put anti-seize on them just in case I have to take this off again in the future. Always prep yourself for the pain to come, boys. So the next thing I'm going to do is put the 1/2-inch nuts back on the transmission mount to hold it down. I'm going to put some anti-seize on these too and get those on there. Again, if you want to do this right, use a torque wrench, look up your torque specs. I'm kind of an asshole, so I just go with the feel it method. Does all feel tight? All right, the next thing I am gonna do, I think, is lower the jack. Everything's mounted back up. Transmission's mounted to the skid plate's mounted to the frame. Everything should be good. So I'm gonna lower the jack and it should all be back to normal. All right, sorry if any of that sound quality was bad. This GoPro is kind of stupid sometimes. It's connected to the media mod, and it's supposed to allow you to select the front and back mic, and it was set on the back mic, which is how I was using it, but when I just went to switch it to the front mic, it said it was on camera mic, like it wasn't connected at all. So, I don't know. If I ever get to 1,000 subscribers, I'll buy a nice camera and stop using this GoPro, and it'll solve a lot of both of our problems. Here's kind of a side look at the skid plate. Like I said, I don't think you gain a whole lot of clearance, because to really do that, you've got to do a tummy tuck and do a body lift to do the tummy tuck. So this is just going to give you maybe an inch or so extra clearance from what I read. But the big thing is it's a lot thicker and stronger skid plate, so it protects everything better, and it's smooth. So if you do brush into things, you'll slide over it easier than the stock skid plate with all those different ridges and angles hanging down. Well, I think that pretty much wraps up the main install. I still have to put back on my transmission and oil pan skid plate, which you might not have, and that's not why you're watching the video. So I don't know if I'll even bother including that. It's just 4 bolts. There's nothing special about it. The next thing I will do that I'm going to film is measure the drive shaft links, because I have to order new drive shafts now that I've changed everything. So what I'm going to do is order Adams drive shafts, and they've got a pretty good reputation for customer service, and they get their products out and shipped to you pretty quick. So I'm going to go that route. There are other good drive shafts out there. Don't feel like you have to order Adams. That's who I've heard about, and I'm going to try them. Okay, so I'm going to real quickly go ahead and measure the length of my drive shaft. It's going to be from here to here. Pretty simple, just where the drive shaft is going to sit. All right, I'll call that 17.5 inches. It doesn't have to be like 100% perfect, because it's going to have some play in the shaft anyway, and you'll have plenty of room for little differences, but that'll do. And now I'll go to the front and do the same thing. All right, guys, well, now that I've got those measurements, my next step is going to be contacting Adams Drive Shaft and placing an order, and then I'll probably make a video of me installing those. But other than that, I think it's time to wrap up the video. I really appreciate everyone being so supportive on the recent videos I've been putting out. I've been getting more and more followers, so thanks to you guys for following along. I'm getting pretty close to wrapping up the build videos. I can't wait to get all the armor on there. I'm so happy to be done with most of the hard, sweaty, slow, tear-filled work I've been doing. So yeah, I'm pretty happy. I'm gonna get back on the trail here soon and hopefully give you guys some good trail videos. So thanks, I'll see you on the next one. Hey guys, future Justin here. My Adams drive shafts came in, so I just tossed them on. I'm just gonna put this in with the transfer case video. it's not enough to really make its own video out of, but I did want to jump in and show you what they look like. And I also wanted to say, Adams Driveshafts, pretty good customer service. They communicated pretty well. They kind of told me what I needed to do to measure. They made sure I got the right drive shafts, and it took them like a day to get those mailed out to me. They were very fast, and then I think it took shipping another couple of days. So shout out to Adams Driveshafts. Hopefully they are as good as I hear, and I hope they hold up really well. They seem to be pretty good quality. So here is the rear drive shaft installed. It looks really nice. It seems to be very high quality. And here's the front drive shaft all installed. I think I'm gonna have to sneak out and test it.